Hey, Bill, thanks for joining us today. As we're getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here, Brian. I work with a company called Weidenhammer. We're a digital transformation consulting company organized around four different pillars or brands that focus on things like software development, process automation, web and marketing, e-commerce technology, as well as infrastructure and security. I've been in some form of technology sales for over 10 years, and I've been with Weidenhammer for six.
And why sales for you?
In the blood, in the blood. My dad was a career salesman, and saw him move up through the ranks into the executive role, and had a good made a good life for himself. So always aspired to be like my old man, and in that way as well as in many others. And I think beyond that, just always had a temperament and personality that enjoyed meeting with people, enjoyed solving problems, and understanding how I can help.
Yeah. There seems to be a pretty good correlation between those who have been raised by parents that were salespeople and then get into it. Because I guess it takes away that initial resistance. It's like, is that what I want to be? What is it? Am I hounding people?
It does. I think another thing that's helped me is in my position, I'm often working with senior executives, right, as my decision maker and my buyer. And having had one of those as a parent takes a lot of the intimidation factor out of it.
So you have a little bit of research on the persona, huh?
Yeah, you could say that.
And how long did it take before sales felt at home, that you had that groove, that you knew it was going to be the right thing for you?
Probably the first 6 months of my career.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny. I in college had a lot of fun, right? Enjoyed my time there, and uh, really didn't know what I was in for when I sort of jumped into the career. I actually started out in IT recruiting, on the recruiter side of the desk. But even there's a large sales element, and it was a very good place to cut my teeth. Right,
Yeah.
so really sort of thrown right into the fire, and picked up a lot of the fundamentals. Really gained a strong work ethic there because you had to, just to make it. But I quickly found, even though there were things I didn't love about that world, the constants there that I've had through this point in my career, are all things that I quickly found I enjoyed. Um,
And do you feel like you had a head start, seeing your dad as a role model? Because I'm sure you heard kind of the mantras, right? About, be on time, be prepared, you know, un-
sure.
understand what the other person cares about.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that he did was really lead by example, right? And that's where a big chunk of my work ethic comes from, for sure.
And what were some of the key pivot points that really got you to the next level in your career, in as far as skill set?
Yeah, good question. I remember in my first leg, right, in the recruiting world, the biggest initial shift that I saw was when you could get out of having to think through all the basic fundamental steps that you had to take in each conversation, and having that sort of be ingrained and able to flow through that naturally. And so by doing that, you're able to navigate the conversation, keep the momentum going, and allow yourself the ability to think about where you want to go next. That didn't come right away. That was
No.
something that I needed. You needed time in it to gain an understanding of the material and the topics you're talking about, and what the script is supposed to be. But once you kind of get those things down and you gain some confidence, you're able to actually think, while you're going through the process of a conversation and a sale, And through that, allow yourself the ability to better navigate the paths that you have available to you.
And how did you develop that? Did you draw it? Did you write it down? Did somebody tell you it?
Good question. Probably all of the above. I'm pretty big going into each conversation and being prepared, right? So I'll tee up several new conversations per day, and for each of those, right, I'm going into them with dedicated time to prepare on my calendar to better understand who that person is, right? Their space, their company, right? What can I draw on? What might they find most relevant in terms of the services that we provide, right? And know that even if I'm not asking questions pertaining to each of those throughout the conversation, knowing that I have those paths available to me as places that we might want to lead the conversation, right? So and while I've been doing it, long enough that I can go into some conversations blind and be effective. I'm more effective when I'm prepared, for sure.
Well, that's it. Because people think, oh, I've been doing it n number of years. I've given the presentation n number of times, but you got to warm up. You got to kind of get your
Mm-hmm.
groove on. Ask yourself, what's the outcome that you want? What do you think they're going to come up with? If I say this, what do you think the reaction's going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Those type of things, especially in your sale. Because a service sale is pretty complex.
It is. It is. Especially when some of the services that we provide are truly transformational, which is impactful, right? So there's a very real value to it, but some executives will see that and gravitate to it quickly, and others you may have to lay a little more groundwork, right, to get them to that point. And the other big challenge, it's a blessing and a curse here. We provide a broad range of services, which is great because just about everybody could use us in some way, right? It's just a matter of identifying what in which area, and when the timing is right.
What's the hardest part of your sale?
It's probably that, honestly. It's I think the first, when you step into this role, the first thing, like many new companies and positions, is fully comprehending everything we do, on being able to carry the conversation, and just being able to open those doors. Those are things that I think you have to learn and can be taught to do in most positions. But once you're at that point and you're able to get the at bat, um, being able to successfully take those conversations through to an opportunity and close, is something that takes even more time to get down. And I think it comes down to a lot of the things that I had said, right? Being able to fully understand and comprehend the things that we do, and being able to think your way through and map out those conversations as you go.
Now, I got to imagine you don't get many inbound, like people filling out the website going, I need some digital transformation services. Have Bill call me. You don't get those, do you?
Not enough,
No.
certainly.
I'm
We
CEO of
do get a,
GM. Yeah.
yeah, we do get a little bit, right?
You do? Really?
A little,
Yeah.
right? But they're not. It's rare that they are that they come across as, hey, we're looking for you to transform our business, right? It tends to be more specific, right? We
Pinpoint. Yeah.
exactly, right, and that's okay, right? That's how most of our relationships start, right? Is we come in to fill a need that's timely, and valuable in and of itself, but through the services that we provide, and through the impact that the services we provide have in an organization, right? We're able to go in and navigate through the organization to provide value elsewhere, right? So that's the biggest blessing related to having this broad range. But you're right. The amount of inbound is low. Where we are able to generate the most inbound is through efforts of folks like myself and the experts in our technical teams speaking at events and conferences, and really, positioning ourselves as the thought leaders that we are, and through that, right, instilling some confidence and credibility in the audience and range of potential customers. So we do generate it that way. I don't know that I would characterize that as purely inbound, right? Somebody searched,
Yeah, that's kind of like content marketing,
right,
for thought leadership. Um, Starting a conversation with them by showing your expertise.
right. And if I make a bit of a distinction, right? Not that I don't have any help from marketing in that activity, but I'm putting a lot of my own time into that. So it's not a bluebird inbound or anything like that.
Right, you're out there earning it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting that you bring up that idea in our digital marketing world. One of the services that has been fastest growing for us in the past 3 years has been digital marketing services and retainers for B2B companies, and a lot of them, are in manufacturing, wholesale distribution, and those sorts of industrious spaces where sales have been relationship driven. They've been driven by name and reputation, right? And it's boots on the ground, face to face. And those industries, like most, right, are moving towards a digital sale. As buyers are more, their birth dates are getting later and later. They're more tech savvy. They don't want to fax in orders. They do their research. And I think about that often as I help our customers in those segments to move more towards a digital way of attracting business and a digital sale. I think about that often, reflecting on my own position.
Well, right. The days of people seeing an ad, converting, given their email address to get a book of some piece of content, and then the salesperson calling and turning it into a deal. Compare that against, they hear Bill talk about a success story of, before, middle, and end, and what you ran into and what you learned. And all of a sudden they reflect, well, that sounds like what we're facing.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah. The other advantageous, position that we're in, being in technology, is the constant change means that there's a constant opportunity for education of our customers. And we've also seen that our buyer personas have shifted significantly over the past 5 or even 10 years, from being the director of IT or a CIO 99% of the time to being business leaders in different lines of business, the CFO, the CEO, right? And with those folks, there's even more of an education opportunity, right? Which is a good position to be in terms of generating credibility for yourself. They're also closer. They tend to be closer to the value impact of the service as well, which is a good thing.
And how do you stay out of the commoditization? Meaning, like, let's say you go, you speak, they say, Bill, tell us more about that. You have several meetings, then they agree they want to do something. You propose a solution. They try and get it done, and they go, well, we don't have a contract with them. We've got a contract with my cousin over here, and I think he's good at this digital transformation stuff. He read a book. Why don't we use them? Because services can very easily be commoditized because, they're hard to test because it's people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's faith, and it's trust, and it's belief.
Sure, sure. Well, I think you sort of just answered the question, right? You have to be able to establish those things somehow in the process of developing the relationship and the sale, right? So one of my easily my largest tactic right now for developing new opportunities is using my existed, trusted connections and relationships, whether they're networking connections or customers, right? To be introduced to the folks that I'm trying to meet. And with that, there's credibility, inherent just in the connection that's made, right? So then you're starting out in a position where you're a little ahead of where you would have been if it was entirely cold, right? So that is that's a big thing that helps put you sort of out in front of the eight ball from the beginning. Otherwise, when you're in a position of being competitive, I try not to shy away from the areas where things are commoditized, right? And focus and lean in on what we believe are differentiators to be, which depending on the service or the area we're talking about, can range, right? Based on our experience or our broad service and complementary solutions. So it just depends, but I try not to shy away from the fact that aspects of what we do are commoditized, because I feel like when you've even the playing field in that way and offered that level of transparency, you then develop more of that credibility and trust we're talking about.
And what would you characterize, or if you were to build a great salesperson for your company, say that you had a lab and a bunch of DNA, you could program CRISPR, you could program it the way you want it. What would the ingredients be?
Good question. And it's one that we, like everybody, we're hiring. And it's not easy to find, good help. Hardworking and good work ethic is definitely one of the ingredients. I think to some degree, a natural ability to converse and have be personable, right? And I think that in most cases even goes a step beyond just being able to carry a conversation. But if you can find somebody that is genuine and actually cares about the people that they're talking to on the other end, I think that comes through and translates to results. So that those are the first two, and I think that from those, depending on your level and where you're at in your career, a lot of the other things can be taught in terms of tactics, right, and direction and understanding our industry and the services we provide. But if you can start with those two things, I think you've got the sort of foundational DNA that you need to build on.
But how did you do it? How did you go from technical recruiting to being able to present on digital transformation and feel comfortable and confident enough to add value there?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think that part of the confidence, like I had said before, had been instilled early on, right? I never was really too concerned with the level or I guess the experience of the person that I was calling or presenting to, right? The other side of it is I'm generally presenting on topics which I have expertise in from a business value and impact level, but not a technical implementation level. I can't write a lick of code, right? So that's something that you have to over time understand how to navigate, and based on your audience, understand where and where not to lean, right? So if I have a room full of CFOs, I know that I'm probably one of the most technical people in the room as someone that's not technical, right? Whereas if I'm presenting to a team of CIOs, right, I have to very clearly understand that and know where the boundaries are. And I'm lucky to have a strong team of pre-sales technical resources here who I can bring in to tag team those sorts of conversations with.
And do you typically run into the trap of you go in, you build the need, the vision, the spec, and then they take it and they shop it around? kind of like the ad agency model where everyone comes in for the beauty contest. None of them are paid, right?
Right,
And they
right,
decide to do it internally with those ideas or,
right. Um, Sometimes,
yeah.
rarely. I think the earlier on that you can identify and generate right that level of credibility and trust that we always are striving for, the easier it is for you to ask those kinds of questions well in the early stages of the qualification, aspect of the sale, and then at least you know what you're in for, right? So if you know this is going to be a competitive sale, you've understood that. You know that their procurement department or their finance department requires they have multiple bids. You can understand that, and in some cases, when you really have credibility and trust, you can even help them, with that aspect of the process. So, but are we often brought into scenarios where we've helped to identify and create the need and then get shopped around without a level of transparency or even influence? That's pretty rare.
So if it's rare, what do your clients want from you?
Return on investment. um,
Well, that's the end. That's the outcome.
mhm.
Okay. But let's take it the other direction from the time they hear about Bill to the time they order from you.
Mhm.
What do they care about? Because you don't sound like a sales guy, which is a compliment.
From a sales guy.
Well, yeah, for a guy who talks to sales guys all day.
Yeah.
Because I understand this market. I've worked with several companies in this space. To start a conversation with that executive and continue it through a sales process, they don't want to hear about your company. They
No.
want to hear about what you can do for them.
And it's funny. Even though return on investment is the result,
Yeah.
right? They want to understand that value will and can be delivered, right? So in some cases, they want to understand where you've been able to deliver that in the past, right? And some customers will be very focused on understanding that you've done it for somebody exactly like them, and that may or may not be the case, right? But if you can help them understand the concepts and the values that they can drive, right, in terms of the services that we provide, and then through that conversation with them, convey that you not only understand their business at a high level, but you understand the problem and the challenge that they're faced with, and the goals that they have, and how those dots can be connected, right? Then you're all speaking the same language. And if you can get to that point where you've connected the dots of your solution and the theoretical value that it can drive with their business goals, then then it becomes almost a no-brainer, right, to move forward. So I still, with my buyer being primarily the CFO, the CEO, the COO, understanding that business value early on in the conversation, being able to define it to an extent, is critical. And those are the opportunities where we're winning.
And how do you either prevent or not fall into like the competitive trap or the alternative trap where they could do it with another in-house, another vendor, outsourced, overseas, or we could just buy a product?
Yeah, so buy a product is interesting. And again, I think the answer here is that I don't shy away from the fact that those alternatives exist.
Yeah, good.
Right. So if we're in a situation where, let's say, we are talking about custom software, right, and they're looking at solving a need with custom software or with buying something off the shelf, I want to dive into that comparison and conversation with them, and I want to clearly explain, and this is genuine, that the opportunity to buy something that's going to meet 100% of your needs and keep you out of the technology business is probably the way you should go if that's
It's
available.
possible. Yeah.
But let's look at it in detail. What are your needs, and is that the case? Right here are the pros and cons of either path. Right, and again, by being transparent and genuine, um, we may not close that initial sale, right? But I've made a friend and a trusted partner for the long term, right? And I think I had hit on it before, but with the nature of technology, which is constantly changing, and with the nature of our services, which are fairly diverse, right, and can impact the entire organization from team to team and department to department. When we do get that opportunity to come in and drive value, it's critical that we do that from the onset to be able to capture the rest of that, the rest of the organization. So it's not, in my mind, it's not worth jeopardizing that long-term value and potential together by trying to, jam a square peg in a round hole. So I don't shy away from those things. This is the same for the other alternatives you had talked about, whether it's bringing someone in house. There can be a value to that. You can institutionalize that knowledge, right? But then you get all the headaches of having employees, and are you trying to get in the technology business, right? So each of the scenarios have pros and cons in situations where they're called for and not, and that's okay. If today your situation is, your problem is better solved by an alternative, I support it wholeheartedly, and I'll be here for the next conversation.
Right. Because if it is, they're going to find out, right? It's not,
right.
And you're going to put
exactly.
a ton of time and effort into it and try and, keep them away from it. But eventually somebody say, why don't you just do this?
Right. Maybe they bring us in and they find, throughout the course of the project or after the delivery, they find that lesson, they learn that lesson painfully. Right. And then we have an entity here we'll probably never do business with again. Yeah. Or, in your example, in the sales process, I'm trying to push them somewhere that they maybe shouldn't go. And I invest the time, lose the relationship and the sale. Yeah. Right. So that's been another shift in my career. Right. When you start with no book and nothing, nothing to fall back on, every little sale is critical in the end of the world, which I can relate to because I was there. But when you can grow out of that, it's easier to have a longer view mentality.
And is there something that you do in your sale that you don't see other salespeople doing?
Good question. I think that we've hit a little bit on it here, but one thing I do think that I'm strong in is well, it's really twofold, right? Being able to navigate the conversation and understand the various places I may want to take it, right? And being able to do that effectively in an organic way, I think is something that I'm strong in, and that's a skill that I've learned over time for sure. And again, the preparation is a big part of that. That's probably number one. The other is similar in that I'm able to effectively connect business value to the person on the other end of the line and the solution that we're talking about, and that can be done through a number of different ways, whether it's selling on case studies or just being able to translate the notion of what we're talking about into terms that are real for the business leader that I'm speaking with. That's something that took time as well.
Give us a sense of how much preparation you put into like an average call.
15 to 30 minutes,
Yeah.
depending. It just depends on um, if we're if I sell to a lot of financial services organizations, credit unions, insurance companies, right? The preparation that I go through for new connections in that space tends to be the same, the same sort of playbook,
Good.
right? Nuances and changes here and there, but more or less the same. That's an easier prep cycle for me, right? Whereas if we have somebody come in in an industry that I'm less familiar with, right, that may involve more prep, more research, more conversations. For me across my organization, understanding what I have at my disposal to leverage in terms of success, relationships, case studies. So it varies, but 15 to 30 minutes is a good average.
Good. Great. Hey, Bill, I appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
My LinkedIn would be a good place to start. Bill McGarry with Weidenhammer, and my contact info is all there. And of course, you can always check out Weidenhammer's website, which is www.hammer.net.